collision course with President-elect Donald Trump, who plays down the possibility that Russia had any role in the November elections, arguing that a hack of Democratic National Committee emails may have been perpetrated by some guy in his home in New Jersey. The fracture could become more prominent after Trump is inaugurated and begins setting foreign policy. He already has indicated the country should get along with Russia since the two nations have many common strategic goals. But some of Trump's would-be Republican allies on Capitol Hill disagree. Senator John McCain, an Arizona Republican and chairman of the Armed Services Committee, is readying a probe of possible Russian cyber incursions into U.S. weapons systems. McCain said he has been discussing the issue with Select Intelligence Committee Chairman Richard Burr, a North Carolina Republican, with whom he will be working closely to investigate Russia's suspected interference in the U.S. elections and its alleged cyber threats to the military and other institutions. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, a Kentucky Republican, has been apprised of the discussions. Burr did not respond to requests for comment. Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bob Corker, a Tennessee Republican, also said he intends to hold hearings next year into alleged Russian hacking. Corker is on Trump's short list for Secretary of State, according to Trump transition team. Trump transition officials did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The loudest GOP calls for a Russian probe are coming from McCain and Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. Both have taken a hard line on Russia and have been highly critical of Trump, particularly his praise of President Vladimir Putin. They keep doing more here until they pay a price. They'll keep doing more here until they pay a price, Graham said of Russia. He plans to spearhead legislation and hold a series of investigative hearings next year into Russia's misadventures throughout the world, including suspected Russian meddling in the U.S. elections. I'm going after Russia in every way you can go after Russia. I think they're one of the most destabilizing influences on the world stage. I think they did interfere with our elections, and I want Putin personally to pay the price, Graham said in an interview with CNN on Wednesday.
In national news briefs, on national and world news briefs, from Palo Alto, California, conjoined California twins Eva and Erica Sandoval have become two separate toddlers following a 17-hour marathon surgery and are recovering quite well, officials said Thursday. The 2-year-old Sacramento girls were born conjoined from the chest down and shared a bladder, liver, parts of their digestive system, and a leg. The parents said each girl has retained portions of the organs they shared. Each girl still has one leg. Surgeons said each will likely need a prosthetic leg. From San Diego, the Navy's biggest, most expensive, and most technologically advanced destroyer arrived at its home port on Thursday after a nearly 4-month transit that included some hiccups, such as a high-profile breakdown in the Panama Canal. The USS Zumwalt arrived in San Diego to a welcoming ceremony that included the Commander of Naval Surface Forces, Vice Admiral Tom Roden. And in world news, from Tokyo, the news media widely reported this week that Shinzo Abe would be the first Japanese prime minister to visit Pearl Harbor when he goes later this month, but he won't be. In 1951, then Prime Minister Shigeru Yoshida made a brief visit during a stopover in Hawaii on the way home from San Francisco, where he had signed a peace treaty with the Allied powers and other nations. From Manila, the Philippines Defense Secretary said Thursday that it is highly unlikely that his country will allow the U.S. military to use it as a springboard for freedom of navigation patrols in the disputed South China Sea to avoid antagonizing China. Delfin Lorenzana said U.S. ships and aircraft could use bases in Guam or Okinawa or fly from carriers to patrol the disputed waters. And from Paris, France has signed an accord to allow the Holocaust museums in Paris and Washington to digitize the vast French World War II archives so the museums can more easily display information on the collaborationist Vichy regime to the public. France's Veterans Minister, Jean-Marc Todeschini, said Thursday that the rise of populism in parts of the world makes educating younger generations about the war vital. After the Germans invaded and occupied France in 1940, France's government helped deport Jews to concentration camps.
And it is 22 minutes past the hour, so time to turn to local and regional news. Nebraska's presidential electors are getting deluged with messages trying to sway them before they vote for Republican Donald Trump later this month. But state law has already tied their hands. If any of the 5 electors defy the majority of Nebraska voters who picked Trump, a 2014 law would instantly remove them from the position and prevent Secretary of State John Gale from accepting their ballot. Even so, several of the electors said they've been shocked to receive so many pleas urging them to vote for Democrat Hillary Clinton or even another Republican. The electors chosen at the state GOP convention will formally cast their votes at the Nebraska Capitol on December 19. Elector Craig Safranek of Myrna said he received roughly 1,000 emails in a 3-day period after his name was posted on an online elector list a few weeks after the election. Now he receives 40 to 50 a day. Safranek said he traded emails with a man in Australia and fielded messages from high school students in Michigan. Most are copy and paste notes from groups making a long-shot attempt to defeat Trump through the Electoral College, Safranek said. He said he eventually stopped reading them and now sends them to his junk folder. My thought is it's really not up to me, said Safranek, a small business owner and Trump supporter. In Nebraska, the people voted for Trump. If any of these electors vote against who their state picked, they're kind of taking away the people's voices. I hope they catch some hell for that. Elector Chuck Conrad said he has received so many calls that he stopped answering his phone when he sees a number he doesn't recognize. He said he still reads all of his emails, letters, and Facebook messages to make sure they don't contain any threats. None have so far. It's kind of crazy, said Conrad, a warehouse manager in Hastings and longtime GOP activist. For you and everyone else, the election ended on November 8th. For me, it's still going on until December 19. Nebraska's 2014 law requires at-large electors to pledge that they will vote for the candidate who received the most statewide votes and district electors to vote for the winner in their districts. The Secretary of State then has to inspect each ballot to confirm they followed their pledge. If the ballot is unmarked or violates the pledge, the elector automatically forfeits the office. Elector John Dinkle of Norfolk said most of the messages urging him to vote against Trump have come from out of state. Roughly 1/4 were from Nebraska residents, he said, while most others originated in California, New York, and other progressive coastal states. They range from extremely polite to pretty aggressive, said Dinkle, who owns a farm implement dealership. Some people are almost hysterical. Dinkle said he supported Florida Senator Marco Rubio in the GOP primary, but switched to Trump after Rubio dropped out of the race. As an elector, he said, he absolutely, positively plans to vote for Trump. A commitment is a commitment, he said, short of some felonious act or something that's way out of left field. We should support the candidate who won the vote in each state. Elector Phil Balin said he has fielded calls, emails, and letters from 20 to 25 people, all in Nebraska, urging him to switch his vote. He said he still plans to follow the law requiring him to cast a ballot for Trump and believes all electors should adhere to what voters in their states decided. I've had some good discussions with folks and tried to use this as a launching pad for a more civil discourse, said Beelan, an Omaha attorney. For everyone who's reached out to me, I've tried to reach out in kind. We need to get past the ugliness of this campaign. That was the most discouraging thing to me. Beeland said he didn't support Trump in the GOP primary and still has concerns about the president-elect, but cast a ballot for him in the general election in hopes that he would surround himself with more traditional conservatives. He said he was happy Trump appointed former Republican rival Ben Carson to a cabinet position. Nebraska's fifth elector, Paul Berger of Kearney, did not return email and phone messages.
Nebraska might not be such an attractive place after all for highly educated people on the move. New Census Bureau figures released this week confirm that Nebraska has reverted to its past form in losing more college graduates than it attracts. For a time around the Great Recession, Nebraska's relatively strong economy helped turn the state's traditional brain drain into a brain gain. More people with a bachelor's degree or higher were moving into the state than moved out. That's a key measure for a small state looking to grow and compete economically with big hitters nationally. But census estimates from the American Community Survey show that Nebraska is losing out overall, annually seeing some 2,300 more highly educated people move out than move into the state. The figures looked at the movement of people 25 years and older during a 5-year period from 2011 through 2015. That rate of loss has even picked up in the last few years. In the 5-year period from 2009 to 2013, Nebraska was losing a net 1,069 people annually who had bachelor's and advanced degrees. It's obviously a cause for concern, said David Drodes, research coordinator at the University of Nebraska at Omaha Center for Public Affairs Research. It's something that the state has struggled with for a long time. Still, the figures are not all bad for Nebraska. Census figures show that the state is steadily increasing its percentage, and numbers of people with bachelor's and graduate degrees up to 29.3% of the population in the latest figures, compared to 27.7% in the 2006-10 estimates. The differences amount to a gain of some 34,600 people with bachelor's and advanced degrees. So in baseball terms, Nebraska is improving the franchise through its farm system, but losing out in the free agent market. Eric Thompson, an economics professor and director of the Bureau of Business Research at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, said the migration figures show that Nebraska has returned to its default conditions, for now at least. A similar struggle is happening in Nebraska's neighboring states. Iowa, for instance, is losing a net of some 3,200 highly educated people annually. But Thompson was encouraged by the overall growth in the number of college graduates in Nebraska. We can afford to be patient, he said. A lot of things are going well. Thompson said Nebraska has done well raising its quality of life with wonderful public schools, high quality health care, and relatively low crime. Nebraska's cold weather is, of course, a natural deterrent for many people, young and old, and Nebraska's biggest cities aren't big enough to lure many young college graduates looking to start their careers in large cities, Thompson said. The state also continues to debate its tax climate. It's fair to say we don't have a highly attractive tax environment, Thompson said. Nebraska can sell its people, said Mitch Arnold, a professional recruiter who lives in the Gretna area. Arnold, owner of the recruiting firm Preferred Partners, said Nebraska has good people with which to live, work, and socialize. When he's recruiting people for Nebraska companies, it helps if the prospective hires have lived in Nebraska before, Arnold said. It also helps, he said, if those people have yet to start a family, buy a house, or put kids in school. Deep roots that can be hard to pull up. Even so, Arnold himself made that kind of a move back here. He grew up in Loop City, moved to North Carolina early in his career, but moved back to Nebraska with a wife and 2 kids. It was a great move for me and my wife, and I use that when I try to bring people back.
Betty Karsten is 89, doesn't use a computer, and can't figure out how to use the iPad where her son stored all her phone numbers. So she keeps a hard copy phone book tucked under her kitchen radio, a lifeline to the world outside her home on the outskirts of Fremont, where she lives alone. Yet Karsten's son, a retired grocery store butcher who started cutting meat when the men left for World War II, knows someday the iconic white pages will no longer appear at her doorstep. I understand that because my son never uses the phone book. He uses the smart, whatever that is, the smartphone. The printed directory's demise might not be far off. On Tuesday, the Nebraska Public Service Commission, which regulates phone companies in the state, gave CenturyLink permission to stop delivering phone books to homes in the many communities it serves across Nebraska. They'll be available upon request. Other phone companies, such as Windstream in Lincoln, will need to apply separately if they want to ditch their paper directories. A Windstream spokesman said this week the company has no current plans to do so. Robbins, the Public Service Commission's Director of Communications, said Tuesday's order sets a precedent that could soon be applied statewide. The goal is to cut back on the material and environmental costs associated with publishing stacks of hard copy phone books each year. There's an enormous expense in delivering these, and they just end up in the landfill, said Lowell Brooks, Regulatory Counsel for Dex Media, which publishes phone books for CenturyLink. About half of Nebraska households are now wireless only, so their numbers aren't listed in the book, and online directories have become a more popular option for people with internet access. That leaves gaping holes in the white pages, age-old offerings, and audience. Brooks said virtually no one complained after CenturyLink was allowed to stop delivering phone books in Omaha in 2013. Last year, less than 1% of customers in that area requested a print copy of the white pages. The new order applies to CenturyLink's other Nebraska markets, including Fremont, Grand Island, Norfolk, North Platte, McCook, and much of the Panhandle. It's now up to the phone company to decide which customers will keep receiving full printed directories, which will receive only business listings, which can still generate revenue, and which will stop getting phone books altogether. Environmental groups have bemoaned the circulation of unwanted, unused phone books for more than a decade, raising concerns with the solid waste produced when the books aren't recycled, as well as with the felling of trees used to make them, although phone books are typically printed on recycled paper or paper produced using sawmill waste. We support waste reduction, and having a telephone book just show up on your front porch just creates waste, said Heather Creaven of the local nonprofit group Waste Cap Nebraska, which seeks to eliminate waste. The state's major telephone companies have long been required to circulate new alphabetical directories at least once a year. The rule applied only to incumbent phone companies like Windstream, not newer competitors like Time Warner Cable, now Spectrum, or Allo. But the written rule never specifically required doorstep delivery of phone books, only that directories be made available to all customers free of charge. The Public Service Commission now says publishing numbers online will suffice as long as printed copies are still available upon request. Commissioners voted 4-0 to approve the new interpretation of its rules after CenturyLink and Dex Media requested the change this summer. Customers who no longer receive a directory automatically will be notified through an insert in their phone bill, which will include a toll-free number to call to request a hard copy.
Children's Hospital and Medical Center on Thursday took its most visible step so far toward achieving plans for a major expansion in size and offerings. Officials broke ground for a 10-story, approximately $450 million clinical facility expected to change the landscape of a busy Omaha intersection, as well as the scope and scale of pediatric healthcare in the region. The $450 million includes renovation of 100,000 square feet of the existing building, which will begin after construction of the new center is completed in early 2021. The new Hubbard Center for Children, named in recognition of the lead gift from the Theodore F. and Claire M. Hubbard Family Foundation, will be constructed on the West Dodge facing front lawn of the existing hospital at 82nd Street and West Dodge Road, and will add about 500,000 square feet. The current hospital measures 225,000 square feet, not counting the attached specialty clinics. The center will include more than 70 inpatient beds with space for more as needed. The demand for high-quality pediatric care we provide is growing rapidly, straining our current facilities, said Dr. Richard Azizkan, Children's President and CEO, said in the statement, "We must expand in space and scope because children and families are counting on us to be the best now and into the future." Children's typically is near capacity. It serves many patients from Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, and the Dakotas, but some also come from across the country, and last year from 19 other countries. The ideal occupancy for a hospital like Children's, Azizkan said, is about 80%. Children's occupancy has been running at about 95% or slightly more during the week and 85% or more on weekends. On Thursday, 129 of the hospital's 137 beds were full. During the current calendar year, the hospital has had to turn down 97 children for critical care because it hasn't had space. Surgical services grew 13% last year and are on track to do so again this year. Azizkan said the expansion also would allow the hospital to hire more specialists, about 100 over the next 4 or 5 years, and treat more patients from within the region so families don't have to travel elsewhere for specialized services. The hospital in recent years has been adding about 24 physicians a year. Some new recruits will fill unmet needs. Others will establish new specialties. The hospital recently recruited surgeons specializing in complex colorectal disorders. It is our unwavering belief that families deserve a greater depth and breadth of pediatric services and the highest value care close to home, Azizkan said. A strong children's hospital will draw expertise from around the country, and those facilities will allow our research and education activities to flourish and make an impact. Children's specialists generally have joint roles at the hospital and the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Children's and Nebraska Medicine, UNMC's primary clinical partner, recently signed an agreement to explore building on their longtime relationship. Children's also agreed to provide specialty physician services for Madonna Rehabilitation Hospital's new pediatric unit in Omaha. The new facility will be supported by the hospital's 5-year, $50 million Changing Lives Together capital campaign, which is ongoing. About $40 million of that total will be devoted to bricks and mortar and $10 million to research, Azizkan said. Donors have pledged about $28.3 million so far, and the hospital is seeking additional support. The rest of the funds for the new facility will come from hospital operations and a modest loan. Construction is expected to start in the spring. Once completed, the Hubbard Center for Children will become home to many of children's critical pediatric programs and services. The neonatal intensive care unit will move over from nearby Methodist Hospital. Children's lease for the Methodist space ends in 2021. The center also will include a new and expanded pediatric intensive care unit, a short stay observation unit, surgical services, a larger emergency department, and a fetal care center for mothers carrying high-risk babies. Also included is a new hematology and oncology floor. In addition to naming the building, the Hubbard Family Foundation has pledged to support the Theodore F. Hubbard, MD Cardiac Care Center and the Claire M. Hubbard Healing Garden Solarium. Ted Hubbard Jr. and his wife Colleen have funded a new rooftop garden. Theodore F. Hubbard was a pioneering Omaha cardiologist. Ted Hubbard recalled that in the days before specialists, his father performed surgery on patients of all ages, from the elderly to tiny babies. His mother was a dietitian for the Army during World War II and served 4 years at Walter Reed General Hospital, now the Walter Reed Army Medical Center. There, she had a patient named Eisenhower who gave her a little trouble, Ted Hubbard recalled. The foundation also has supported projects at UNMC and the Henry Dorley Zoo, as well as other causes. They'll be in the upper echelons of the children's hospitals in the United States when this is completed, Hubbard said of Omaha's Children's. They, his parents, would be happy to know that their investments were paying off. Azizkan said medical and surgical wards, which are in excellent condition, will remain in the existing structure. Officials expect to move administrative and other non-clinical activities to existing structures on the HDR campus west of 84th Street in 2020. The hospital in June announced that it had purchased the campus from the Durham Family Trust for $33.5 million. HDR, meanwhile, is planning to build and move in early 2020 to a new 10-story headquarters building in Exarban Village, northeast of 67th and Francis Streets. Ozakhan said the new center will be built with the flexibility to accommodate not only additional growth, but also changing medical technology. We're planning this to be a facility that will serve this community for the next 25 to 30 years, he said. Additional details, including a floor-by-floor breakdown of the new facility, are available at changinglives.children's-omaha-maha.org.
From Seward, volunteer firefighters worked in frigid temperatures Thursday morning to battle an inferno that started overnight and gutted a historic downtown Seward building, leaving as many as 10 people homeless and destroying an antique shop. Seward Mayor Josh Eichmeyer said the families who lived in apartments in the building have been offered assistance by the American Red Cross. It's always tragic when you have a fire, especially when it impacts so many families that are living in that building, he said. I can only imagine how disruptive and scary the whole evening has been for them and their families. The 1918 red brick building was part of the historic Seward Square, a commercial district surrounding Seward County's limestone courthouse and an important part of the community's character. Known as the I.H. Fury Building, it is owned by Sandra Nuttleman, who also ran an antique store downstairs called the Seward Attic. Even though these buildings are old and you hate to lose a building of that historic nature, buildings can be rebuilt, the mayor said. That's why our focus right now is on the families and making sure they're taken care of. The city will work with Nuttleman to ensure the building is secure and doesn't pose a hazard, he said. As far as Nuttleman knows, the roof is gone, but the second floor remains intact, she said. The fire wiped out most of her inventory and ended her antique business, she said late Thursday afternoon. Likely, she said, only some dishes survived the firefight, and if they got wet and froze, they might break. But our loss is not important, said Nuttleman. She's glad the residents of her building made it out safely and is thankful the Red Cross helped them. Neighboring businesses include Cattle National Bank and Trust main office, which had to close as firefighters doused the flames. Bank employees operated from a drive-through just up the street, as well as from a Lincoln office and an empty storefront office across the street from the main office. We're basically dealing with smoke damage at our main bank facility in Seward, said President Ryn Seaman. We consider ourselves pretty fortunate in that regard, considering the damage that occurred to the building next to us. We're pleased that no one was injured and everybody was able to get out safely. Cattle National Bank plans to reopen its main office Monday morning. No other adjoining businesses were damaged, said Seward Fire Chief James Kimsey. Water used to fight the fire formed ice because of the cold temperatures. The fire started during the night when an apartment resident lost power and tried to replace a fuse, fire officials said.
The foundation that helps fund scholarships, grants for teachers, and junior ROTC trips for Omaha Public Schools is one of the country's top-ranked educational foundations, according to a new study. The Omaha Public Schools Foundation nabbed the #2 spot on the Carruthers Institute's latest list of top K-12 education foundations. The Carruthers Institute is a nonprofit think tank that studies education foundations, among other things. Last year, the foundation ranked 4th. The Foundation for Lincoln Public Schools ranked 13th this year. For the annual report, the Carruthers Institute reviewed 2014 tax documents for 188 K-12 school foundations across the country. The rankings take into account 8 measures, including annual revenue, assets, total grants, and program expenses, not solely dollars raised. OPS, with about 52,000 kids, barely cracks the top 100 schools districts by enrollment. But the district's small but mighty foundation raises and distributes more money than much larger school districts, thanks to a deep and dedicated pool of donors, Executive Director Toba Cohen Dunning said. That is a true testament to the community, she said. In 2014, the foundation's revenue was $26.3 million, and its net assets were valued at $35.8 million. The top-ranked foundation in the Carruthers analysis was the Pinellas Educational Foundation in Florida. The Pinellas County School District has an enrollment of more than 107,000 students. Created in 1984 with a founding gift of $1,155 from a group of administrators, the OPS Foundation funds programs and projects that fall outside the district's annual budget, such as scholarships, teacher innovation grants, or the 2014 trip for several Benson High School junior ROTC students, or the 2014 trip several Benson High junior ROTC students took to France for the 70th anniversary of D-Day. The foundation has recently helped raise money for sports fields, the new AgroBox growing container for Bryan High's urban agricultural academy, and select building projects such as the planned visual and performing arts addition at South High. Teachers can also apply for classroom grants to buy computers or books. Other funds go toward field trips for the Rose Theater or Fontanelle Forest, said Adam Steffen, the chairman of the foundation's board. This year, the foundation has received more applications than it can actually fund. There are some pretty amazing programs we want to continue, Steffen said. A parent pay before and after school program called Kids Club. Revenue from the program covers administrative and staffing expenses, so there are no administrative fees for donors, Cohen Dunning said. When we do $1 million field, 100% of that, $1 million goes to that project, she said. That's the message we try and help people to understand. Your money goes exactly where you want it to go.
And at 48 minutes past the hour, we'll turn to death and funeral notices from each of our papers. These from the Lincoln Journal-Star on Friday, December 9. Allgood, Joyce Allgood, was 79 when she died in Superior on December 7. Axt Guchenauer, Adeline Olinda Axt Guchenauer, was 82 when she died in Plattsmouth on December 7. Butler, Karen Cook Butler, was 67 and a resident of Lincoln. The Butheris, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home. The family requests memorials to Pius X High School Foundation, Daniel J. Gross High School Foundation, or Tabitha Hospice. Carmen, Norma Jean Carmen, was 88 and lived in Bennett. The Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home. Clupney, Lou James Clupney was 89 when he died on December 7. The Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home is handling services. Drebo, Robert L. Bob Drebo, was 88 and lived in Crete. Celebration of life will be handled on Monday, December 12 at Faith Bible Church in Lincoln. Memorials to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, Southeast Nebraska, or First Street Bible Church Children's Ministry. Freeman, Gail Diane Freeman, was 81 and lived in Lincoln. The Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home. Gillespie, Patrick or Pat Gillespie, was 73 and lived in Lincoln. Memorials to Horizon Hospice. In lieu of services, please join us when we toast Pat's memory from 1 to 4 p.m. on Sunday, December 11 at Patty's Pub. Hansmeyer, Dr. Floyd Walter Hansmeyer, was 96 and lived in Fairbury. The Gertis Meyer Funeral Home in Fairbury. Lippens, Pederis Lippens, was 57 when he died in Lincoln on December 6. McGee, Gerald or Jerry H. McGee, was 77 and lived in Lincoln. He was a veteran. The Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home is handling services. Memorials are suggested to Zion's Evangelical Lutheran Church, Children's Hospital in Omaha, or Lincoln Choral Artists McCashland, Don McCashland, was 78 and lived in Lincoln. Services are pending at Eutheris, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home. Prokop, Michael J. Prokop, was 72 and lived in Fremont. The Moser Memorial Chapel in Fremont. Reef Schneider, Patricia A. Reef Schneider, was 85 and lived in the Lincoln area. The Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home is handling services. Memorials are suggested to Aging Partners Foster Grandparent Program or the Nebraska Chapter Alzheimer's Association. Skunkweiler, Wesley Sonny Dwayne Skunkweiler, was 88 and lived in Fairfield. He was a veteran serving in the U.S. Army during the Korean conflict. The Livingston Butler Boland Funeral Home in Hastings is handling services. Seek, Robert M. Seek, was 72 and lived in Omaha. The Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home in Lincoln is handling services. Williams, Gertrude C. Williams, was 94 and lived in Ashland. The Marcy Svoboda Funeral Home in Ashland. Memorials to the Word of Hope Lutheran Church or VFW Post 9776.
And from the Omaha World Herald, Andreessen, Marion Mimi Andreessen, age 99, passed away in California on November 24. There is no funeral home listed, no memorials listed. Bauman, Deacon Charles A. Skip Bauman, age 69, a retired Omaha Fire Department battalion chief. Memorials are requested to St. Bernard Catholic Church. Bethany Funeral Home on 82nd and Harrison is handling the arrangements. Bennett, Betty P. Bennett, age 83. In lieu of flowers, memorials to Open Door Mission or the Salvation Army. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Bitzer, Leslie T. Bitzer, age 52. There will be a complete notice later. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Bray, Keith E. Bray, age 92, a veteran of the Navy. Memorials to the family. John A. Gentleman Mortuaries on L Street is handling the services. Burroughs, Annette W. Burroughs, age 52. Raider Mortuary, Ames Chapel, is handling services. Christensen, Byron Christensen, age 77, of Omaha. Raider Mortuary, 108th Street Chapel. Daly, Barbara Bernice Dorsey Daly, age 75, of Omaha. There is no funeral home listed. There are no services listed. Denton, Sharon K. Denton, age 71. Memorial Mass will be announced at a later date. The Bethany Funeral Home at 82nd and Harrison. Freeburg, Lyle A. Freeburg, age 85, a veteran. Memorials are suggested to IBEW Local 22 Retirees Club, the Madonna Rehabilitation of Omaha, or Brookstone Meadows. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. He was a veteran. Gammon, Jane D. Good Gammon, age 76, of Glenwood, Iowa. A memorial fund has been established. Peterson Mortuary in Glenwood is handling services. Hannah, Daphne A. Hannah, age 54. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Chapel is handling the arrangements. Hanson, Jeffrey S. Hanson, age 37, of Bellevue. Arrangements are pending. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Memorial Chapel, Bellevue Memorial Chapel is handling the arrangements. Hayek, Sister Michelle Hayek, ND. Memorials to the Notre Dame Sisters. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. No memorials or memorials to the Notre Dame Sisters. Heinzman, Elizabeth A. Betty Heinzman, age 78, of Omaha. Memorials to the family, Brahman Mortuary, 72nd Street Chapel. Hickman, Walter P. Hickman, age 66, a veteran. Private Family Services, cremation, Heafy Hoffman, DeVore Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Hull, Benjamin C. Chuck Hull, Colonel, U.S. Air Force, retired, age 7. Memorials to St. Thomas More Catholic Church, Metro Right to Life, the Visiting Nurse Association, or Guide Dogs for the Blind. Carisco Larkin Staskowitz Funeral Home on F Street. Krachik, David Krachik, age 68 of Omaha, a veteran. Memorials to the family for later designation. Reichmuth Funeral Home on West Maple is handling the services. Christ, Laverne Edward Christ, age 89, a veteran. Memorials to Brookstone Village. Military honors by Millard American Legion Post 374 and VFW Post 8334. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Lang, Jeff D. Lang, age 58, a veteran. Military honors by American Legion Post 331. Carisco Larkin Staskowitz Funeral Home on F Street is handling the arrangements. Matthews, Michael Lee Matthews, age 63. Memorials will be directed by the family. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. McDowell, Janet D. McDowell, age 82. West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home on West Center Road. Meehan, Samuel Meehan, age 93, a veteran. Memorials are suggested to Josie Harper Hospice House. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Passarelli, John Edward Passarelli, age 32. Memorials in John's name are suggested to St. Cecilia's Grade School, Heart Ministry, Sienna Francis House, or the Stevens Center. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Padavina, Joseph Joe Padavina, Sr., age 91, a veteran. Military honors by American Legion Post No. 1. In lieu of flowers, memorials to St. Luke's Mid-America Heart Institute or Santa Lucia Festival. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Reed, Glenn A. Reed, age 81. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Regier, James W. Regier, age 90, of Falls City, Nebraska. Dorr and Clark Funeral Home, Falls City, Nebraska, is handling the arrangements. Rolfe, Roy C. Rolfe, that's R-O-L-F-E, age 86. Memorials to his Alzheimer's Association. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Shawla, Gladys K. Shawla, age 96. Complete notice later. John A. Gentleman Mortuaries and Crematory on 72nd Street. Sheridan, Claudia V. Sheridan, age 80. Memorials to Nebraskans United for Life or St. Cecilia Cathedral. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Tadlock, Gary J. Tadlock, age 58, of Omaha. Bethany Funeral Home, 82nd and Harrison. Wellendorf, Judy J. Wellendorf, 74. In lieu of flowers, memorials to Poor Sisters of St. Clair. Heafy Hoffman, DeWart Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. And my final listing is Williams, Francis Williams, age 90, services December 11th at New Light Baptist Church at 4011 Maple Street in Omaha. There is no funeral home listed.
Listeners, memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible, and they go a long way toward keeping us on the air. Please keep us in mind when memorials are listed as donor's choice or your favorite charity. Donations can be sent to the Radio Talking Book Network at 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205 in Omaha, Nebraska. Our zip is 68152. Thanks for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter, and Bob and I will be back following a short break with editorials, entertainment, business, and sports.
Yeah, I'm reading this thing, and I hit this one that just completely put me in shock. John Passarelli played baseball with my son. He's only 32 years old. His dad is an attorney in town.
Okay. What? Any clue as to cause of death?
Well, it says memorials to Heart Ministry. So, I mean, that was one of the places. It doesn't say what, but he played baseball with him for about 4 years at the Hillside Memorial Little League. Nice kid. What a shock.
30. Wow.
I wouldn't say Nick was really good friends with him. They were, friends.
Yeah.
But the fact that, that somebody that young and somebody that, I'm reading that, I'm going, John Passarelli, I know him. Expect old people. We don't expect young people.
No, you don't. That's always a shock.
Well, I have a very short public pulse. Did you see conservatives?
Yeah.
Did you read that? I mean, they actually hired an outside contractor, spent millions of dollars, and they didn't like the report, so they buried it.
Yeah. If they see we're wasting this much money, they might not give us more.
I'm sure you dealt with it when you were CEO of the company that you had, but we always had I had to put together a budget every year. And by God, you spent that budget, because if you didn't spend it,
you didn't get it.
You didn't get it the next year. So, at the come toward the end of the year, you're looking at your budget and you're going, I got to go find something to spend this
buy.
Yeah. Nick, when he was going to Central High School, found, he got kind of involved in helping with the sound systems and doing things and amplification and stuff for some, and he got digging around and found a box of brand spanking new microphones that had never been opened, never been used, but they were in the closet.
Somebody had to buy somebody.
Somebody was spending budget money. How do you pronounce China's Xi Jinping? Xi Jinping. Thank you, Paul, and welcome back, listeners. We'll start the second half with the opinion and editorials from our respective papers and an opinion article from the Omaha World Herald entitled Ambassador from Iowa, Branstad Pick Pleases China. President-elect Donald Trump has made some provocative decisions in foreign policy, from speaking by phone with Taiwan's president to blasting China on Twitter. But Trump's calming choice Wednesday could ease fears of tensions escalating between the world's top two economies. He tapped America's long-serving governor, Iowa's Terry Branstad, as the next U.S. ambassador to China. The nomination comes as both nations jockey for economic and military influence in Asia at a pivotal moment in the relationship. China is Iowa's third largest export market at $1.2 billion last year. It is Nebraska's fourth largest export market at $484 million. Both states sell corn, pork, beef, soybeans, and more to China. International markets responded positively after Trump chose a longtime friend of Chinese President Xi Jinping to represent the American government in Beijing. Branstad has known Xi since 1985. The Iowan was in his first term as governor when he welcomed a young Communist Party official from China's Hebei province to Iowa for an agricultural exchange. The two have visited each other frequently since then, both in China and the United States. Branstad has made 4 trade trips to China since being reelected in 2011. Branstad said they share a friendship built on mutual respect. But as former Branstad aide Tim Albrecht told the Des Moines Register, there's not just a respect there, there's a kinship that's hard to describe. Chinese Foreign Ministry spoke of Liu Kang, a spokesman, Liu Kang, called Branstad an old friend of the Chinese people. That personal bond could be useful as Trump seeks to navigate rough patches and potential shifts in American foreign policy on issues such as trade, the South China Sea, the North Korea nuclear threat, and now Taiwan, which the U.S. has recognized as part of China since 1972. Branstad is in a strong position with both leaders. He is an early Trump supporter, and the governor's son helped the Trump campaign finish a surprising second in Iowa. This positions Branstad as a steadying hand, trusted in Washington and Beijing. That's a welcome trait given the complexities of Sino-American relations and other countries' increasing economic reliances on each other.
And turning to the editorial page of the Lincoln Journal-Star, Mike Sachs' Star Tribune cartoon includes the news item, Kellogg's drops advertising from racist, misogynist, anti-Semitic website Breitbart.com. And it features Tony the Tiger with his Kellogg's Frosted Flakes in his hand, pointing at a computer with Breitbart's logo on the screen, and Tony the Tiger echoing his famous phrase, "They're hate," instead of great. As we look at letters to the editor, Taylor Gold of Lincoln writes, following a projected state budget shortfall of $910 million, Governor Pete Ricketts has proposed a flat budget in an attempt to cover the state's budget gap. One of the budget cuts he has been vocal about making is education. Governor Ricketts has previously alluded to the potential of future education cuts and has now stated that the University of Nebraska will have to make cuts. This is a disappointing departure from former Governor Dave Heinemann's expansion of education spending. Nebraska has a great educational system that we should be proud of, and it was built in part because education administrators were not confined by restrictive budgets. Governor Ricketts stated that these cuts are the financial realities of having to overcome the budget shortfall. I hope that Governor Ricketts is ready for the realities that will face the state and its educational institutions if he follows through with cutting from education budgets. Anita Krause of Lincoln writes, well, folks, the Republicans hit the jackpot this time, literally. Every money-hungry addict wants to hit a jackpot. Now they have elected the ultimate shyster. They have put the rest of the United States in great peril. Ever since I became aware of politics, Republicans have scammed, schemed, or just stolen all the money they could from people of any vulnerable institution on the planet. Just look how Kansas Governor Sam Brownback and his cohorts bankrupted the state and even took money from the school system. Now they're in debt and couldn't care less. Governor Pete Ricketts would like to do that here, but we have a unicameral legislature. This behavior is called addiction. Anyone who is connected to some kind of addict knows the hell they cause in their families and jobs. They don't worry about anyone but themselves. Now the Republicans will take away anything that helps people, like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or Obamacare. Privatizing everything makes the rich richer. They can raise the premiums and prices until the poor and middle class have very little left. Congratulations, voters. Think everything was so bad before? Get used to the new 7-year-old dictator. You can find him on Twitter most of the time, getting even with those who have hurt his feelings. So sad. Give that boy some ice cream.
The following is an editorial from Doyle McManus from the Los Angeles Times entitled, Trump's Team Looks Pretty Mainstream. The prevailing opinion on President-elect Donald Trump is that he's unpredictable, a man of no fixed views who transcends traditional notions of right and left. Donald Trump is post-ideological. Trump's campaign pollster, Tony Fabrizio, said last week at a Harvard University conference, with Trump, you will have no idea each morning what's going to happen, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich said earlier, because he will have no idea. Maybe, but if you watch what Trump does, not what he says, which at this point mostly means the choices he makes for cabinet positions, he doesn't look unusual at all. In Trump's pick for economic and domestic policymaking jobs, there's a consistent underlying thread. And no, it's not that there are so many of them that are billionaires. Most of them could have been nominated by any GOP nominee, including Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio. There's nary a populist among them, and even the conservative kind. Conservatives are happy, Scott Reed, a political advisor to the business establishment U.S. Chamber of Commerce, told me. It's a mainstream conservative list of very competent people. Take a look at the names. Stephen Mnuchin, the choice for Treasury, is a billionaire who worked for Goldman Sachs before buying a bank of his own. Like Trump, he was once a Democrat, but he's a Republican now. Mnuchin says his first priority is cutting taxes, especially corporate taxes. Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary in waiting, is another billionaire investor. His main cause are trade deals, but he also wants to dismantle most of Dodd-Frank financial regulation law. Tom Price at Health and Human Services is a 6-term GOP congressman who wants Medicare and Medicaid revamped and managed mostly by the private sector, once Obamacare is repealed, of course. Betsy DeVos, the choice for education, is a champion of privately run charter schools and voucher plans to help parents pay private school tuition. Before Trump, she supported Jeb Bush. At transportation, Elaine Chao spent 8 years in George W. Bush's cabinet, and she's married to state Republican leader Mitch McConnell. It's hard to get much more establishment than that. Ben Carson, the former neurosurgeon, may add a dash of eccentricity at housing and urban development, in part because he has no real experience in housing policy, but his views are pretty standard for the GOP. Carson once called fair housing a failed socialist experiment and told a television interviewer that poverty is really more of a choice than anything else. There's not that much of a populist insurrectionist. There's not a populist insurrectionist in the bunch. This is a business-friendly cabinet of pragmatists, a top corporate lobbyist in Washington told me, asking for anonymity to protect his multinational clients. These are people orthodox Republicans can work with. What happened to all the populism in Trump's platform that made him the champion of so many white working class voters? It's been quietly downsized since Election Day. The wall Trump promised to build along the southern border is now a fence. The $1 trillion infrastructure program to build roads, bridges, and airports has shrunk to $550 billion, and most of that, if Congress agrees, will be private sector investment, not government money. Drain the swamp? Yes. There's a rule barring lobbyists from serving in the transition, but they can get around it simply by revoking their lobbying registration. Trump and Ross say they still plan to renegotiate NAFTA and other trade deals, but they plan to do it patiently, not abruptly. Tariffs are the last thing, Ross told CNBC last week. Tariffs are part of the negotiation. That doesn't mean Trump has forgotten his working class voters. He has offered them a series of grand gestures. He has renounced his salary as president. He wants to cancel the contract for a new Air Force One to save money. He jawboned Carrier into keeping 730 jobs in Indiana in exchange for $7 million in tax credits. All brilliant marketing and enough to launch a victory tour, rallies in Ohio, North Carolina, and Iowa so far, and Michigan next. So far in practice, Trumpism looks like mainstream conservatism, plus tougher trade negotiations, and now circuses, just like the campaign.
And this is George Will's column appearing in the Lincoln Journal-Star. So this is the new conservatism's recipe for restored greatness. Political coercion shall supplant economic calculation in shaping decisions by companies in what is called, with diminishing accuracy, the private sector. This will be done partly as conservatism's challenge to liberalism's supremacy in the victimhood sweepstakes, telling aggrieved groups that they are helpless victims of vast impersonal forces against which they can be protected only by government intervention. Responding to political threats larded with money of other people, Carrier has somewhat modified its planned transfers of some manufacturing to Mexico. This represents the dawn of bipartisanship. The Republican Party now shares one of progressivism's defining aspirations, government industrial policy, with the political class picking winners and losers within and between economic sectors. This always involves the essence of socialism, capital allocation, whereby government overrides market signals about the efficient allocation of scarce resources. Therefore, it inevitably subtracts from economic vitality and job creation. When speaking at the Carrier plant, Mike Pence said the free market has been sorting it out, and America's been losing. Trump chimed in, every time. When Republican leaders denounced the free market as consistently harmful to Americans, they are repudiating almost everything conservatism has affirmed. Edmund Burke taught that respect for a free society's spontaneous order would immunize politics from ruinous overreaching, from the hubris of believing that we have the information and power to order society by political willfulness. The Republican Party is saying goodbye to all that. Indiana's involvement in the Carrier drama exemplifies the entrepreneurial federalism, states competing to lure businesses. This is neither new nor necessarily reprehensible. There are, however, distinctions to be drawn between creating a favorable climate for business generally and giving direct subsidies to alter the behavior of businesses already operating in the state. And when ad hoc corporate welfare, including tariffs, becomes national policy, it becomes a new arena of regulation and hence of rent seeking, which inevitably corrupts politics. And by sapping economic dynamism, it injures the working class. The most widely discussed and properly praised book germane to today's politics is J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy, which describes the sufferings and pathologies of the white working class, largely of Scots-Irish descent, in Appalachia and the Rust Belt. This cohort from which Vance comes is, he says, one of America's most distinctive subcultures, particularly in its tenacious clinging to traditional mores, many of them destructive. His book has often been misread as primarily about the toll taken by economic forces, globalization, automation, etc. Actually, Vance casts a cool eye on the theory that if they only had better access to jobs, other parts of their lives would improve as well. His primary concern is with lack of agency and learned helplessness, the passive acceptance of victim status. One theory of the 2016 election is that the white working class rebelled not just against economic disappointments, but also against condescension, demanding not just material amelioration, but even more recognition of its dignity. It is, however, difficult for people to believe in their own dignity when they believe that their choices are powerless to alter their lives' trajectories. Eventually, they will detect the condescension in the government's message that their fortunes are determined not by things done by them, but by things done to them. Such people are susceptible to charismatic presidential leadership with its promise that executive power without limits can deliver them from unhappiness by delivering to them public goods. In contrast, there was dignity in the Joad family of John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. When the Dust Bowl smothered Oklahoma, the Joads were not enervated. They moved west in search of work. What formerly was called conservatism resisted the permeation of society by politics, and particularly by the sort of unconstrained executive power that has been wielded by the 44th president. The man who will be the 45th forthrightly and comprehensively repudiates the traditional conservative agenda and in reversing it, embraces his predecessor's executive swagger.
Time now to turn to today's living and entertainment, and a nice little article about a young Nebraska couple from Scotts Bluff. After months of work and support of the community, Western Nebraska residents Kyle Van Newkirk and Emily Ofsdijk have won the Operation TAP National Tap Dance Competition. Operation TAP challenged tap dancers across the country to produce a video of themselves tap dancing to a theme. Then viewers voted on social media. The Van Newkirk Ofsdijk video received a total score of 3,265.5, outpacing the second place video 2,726.5, and third 1,974.5. The score was determined by aggregating the nationwide vote tallies. Operation TAP posted the results, and the congratulations immediately came pouring in. My friend who does Operation TAP sent me a text message, Van Newkirk said. He said, "This is a big deal, Kyle." Van Newkirk choreographed the video called Date Night and danced with Ofsdijk. Date Night featured them dancing their way to a dinner date. The video garnered votes from across the United States. Since Van Newkirk was the choreographer, he won a trip to New York. The trip, beginning December 17, offers the opportunity to learn from world-renowned choreographers and other dancers. Their video will also premiere there. Van Newkirk said. Ofsdijk said she was going to try to go too. Both dancers said they are grateful for the support of the Scottsbluff-Gering community for the votes that helped them win the competition. "We are thankful for the awesome support of the community," Ofsdijk said.
And this is the Ask Amy column written by Amy Dickinson. Dear Amy, a dozen years ago, I married a very intelligent, kind, and highly educated man. We were both in our 50s. I had more money than he did, but I felt that with his good job, he could certainly pay his share of our living expenses. We set up a joint bank account to do so, but after several months, I found that I was the only one putting any money into it. We live in my home, and I now pay for all of the expenses, including food. His money goes to pay for his house, where his 40-year-old daughter and her husband, a lawyer, live rent-free. I feel used to the point that I want to end our marriage. When I bring up the subject of money, he says that he pays in kind by taking care of certain household chores. Frankly, so do I. He will soon come into a substantial amount of money. Ours has become only a marriage of convenience. Should I charge him rent or throw him out? Signed, Tired of Paying. Dear Tired, this does not seem like a marriage of convenience, except perhaps for him. I can see how it would be quite convenient for your husband to let you pay for your shared household food and household expenses. First, you should let him know that your marriage is on the line. If you two want to salvage what is left of it, you should both be prepared to be totally transparent regarding income, savings, assets, and debts, divvying up your expenses, and then abide by whatever agreement you draft. You could seek the services of a marital mediator who would work with a counselor to help you find an equitable solution. You should see a lawyer regardless of whether you intend to stay in the marriage. Keep detailed records of everything and work toward preserving your own assets. Depending on what state you live in, the double whammy for you would be if your home was considered community property, but this windfall was not if it comes to him by way of inheritance or legal settlement. That's the worst case scenario, which is why you should get legal advice. Dear Amy, I'm a straight male in my late 50s and getting into the dating world. I'm relatively attractive, but a little awkward around women I'm interested in romantically. I can overcome that, but what would probably be a deal breaker at the beginning of a relationship is that I've been a cross-dresser since an early age. I don't want to keep it a secret, but I am sure a woman will bid me adieu if I tell her this when we are first getting to know each other. However, I don't want to wait too long to tell her. Amy, at what point in a relationship should I share my secret? Signed, Closeted. Dear Closeted, it would help if you started to see your cross-dressing not as a secret, but as something elemental that is simply part of you. Your preference doesn't present a health risk to a partner, so you don't have to disclose this before sexual intimacy. You should not lead with it too early, mainly because if a potential partner has no other information about you, she won't be able to put this into context. You should disclose this intimate aspect of you when you find yourself falling for someone. Don't present it as a deal breaker, but as a piece of intimate information you want a partner to know. Some women will be turned off by it, but others will be open to it. Dear Amy, 2 decades of guilt described being sexually assaulted by 2 men when she was a teenager. This happened to me. I was assaulted by a state worker while taking my driver's test when I was a teenager. He instructed me to drive to a fairly secluded place where he assaulted me. I was so shaken, I told my boyfriend immediately, and he reported it to the director. No one believed us because this man was a family man. I later heard that he had done this to other teenagers. This was 50 years ago. I wish I had gone to the police. I saw his obituary in the newspaper, and it turned my stomach. Signed, Guilty. Dear Guilty, this is an appalling abuse of power. 50 years ago, turning him in might have damaged you further, as victims were sometimes blamed for their own assault.
Controversy has followed plus-size model Ashley Graham from groundbreaking magazine cover to groundbreaking magazine cover. First, there was her in a bikini on a cover of the Sports Illustrated Notorious swimsuit issue, which nudged some critics, such as former Sports Illustrated swimsuit model Cheryl Teagues, to claim the size 16 model glamorized being overweight. Then she appeared as the first plus-sized model on the cover of Maxim, with only a white button-down shirt, held, not worn. This time her friends were angry, arguing, as one commentator put it, that Maxim obviously edited her photo to make her appear slimmer. All involved insisted the photos weren't edited. Now Graham, a Nebraska native, has become the first plus-size model to grace the cover of Vogue, British Vogue in her case, and controversy has followed her again. In an editor's letter, British Vogue editor-in-chief Alexandra Schulman said Graham's photo shoot, which shows her lush beauty at full advantage, was fairly last minute. The reason? Many brands flatly refused to lend or make clothes for the model who was outside the sample range, save for one. We are all very grateful to the people at Coach who, under the creative direction of Stuart Vevers, moved speedily to provide clothes for us that had come from outside their sample range, Schulman wrote. They were enthusiastic about dressing a woman who is not a standard model, but sadly, there were other houses that flatly refused to lend us their clothes. Schulman said that refusing to offer clothes that would fit a woman of Graham's size was a mistake. It seems strange to me that while the rest of the world is desperate for fashion to embrace broader definitions of physical beauty, some of our most famous fashion brands appear to be traveling in the opposite, in my opinion, unwise direction, Schulman wrote. It should be noted, too, that size 16 is now the average size of an American woman.
And this is John Roseman's parenting column. The following true story was recently related to me by a credible individual who, for obvious reasons, will remain forever anonymous. I pass it on because it is a quintessential example of the general intemperance of today's parenting. Opens in the white-collar home of a 14-year-old girl and her parents. She is an only child with the surfeit of implications typically these days appertaining thereto. It is the summer of 2016, and said young teen is between 8th grade and her first year of high school. One hot and humid summer day, she tells her parents that she does not want to go to the high school in her district because her friends, all of whom play as she does on the same elite athletic squad, are going or go to a high school that is some 20 miles away in another county. She informs her parents that she wants to go to 20 Mile High. After much yelling, crying, gnashing of teeth, threats, resentment, and guilt, the parents put their home on the market, promptly sell it, and move to the 20 Mile High district. And everyone lives happily ever after, or until said child's next outrageous demand, whichever comes first. What is it like, wonders a person who was denied such privilege as a child, to be 14 years old and in complete control of one's family, to be able to throw a tantrum and thus cause one's parents to pick up and relocate? What is it like to be a big deal at age 14? What sort of adulthood, in the chronological sense of the term only, does this portend? The answers are, in order, weird, strange, and unhappy. Concerning weird and strange, it must be noted that the children in question lack a proper frame of reference. They have no way of knowing what a legitimate childhood is like, including being no big deal. Therefore, they are, to borrow from their vernacular, clueless. Because the big deal child is ubiquitous, they do not know their childhoods are weird and strange from a normal, albeit outmoded, point of view. But the real problem, not just for them, but the rest of us as well, is the strong likelihood that they will never experience sustained contentment as adults. The only adult lifestyle that begins to compare to a childhood where nearly all of one's whims and demands are satisfied by servant parents is celebrityhood. And anyone who pays attention must be aware that celebrity and contentment are hardly synonymous. Long noticed that a good number of children, now known as millennials, seem to believe that a life without drama is a life without meaning. And so, because life is not drama, they manufacture it out of the mundane. Every insult is cause for drama. Every conflict is cause for drama. Every disappointment is cause for drama. Every bump in the road is cause for drama. This is the inevitable consequence of a childhood that is high on indulgence and short on reality. 50 plus years ago, parents took appropriate opportunities to remind children that they were just little fish in a big pond. That reminder has been absent from American parenting vernacular for quite some time, during which the goal of American child rearing has morphed from preparing children for the realities of life to making them perpetually happy by creating the illusion that they are big fish. The question becomes, where do they go from here?
Following is an article from Nicole Anzia from the Washington Post on organizing tasks to restore order and calm your life. In the weeks leading up to the election, I certainly wasn't thinking about how the outcome might influence perceptions about organizing. But since November 9, clients have mentioned feeling especially stressed, in part because Election Day was a stark reminder that some things are unexpected and just plain out of their control. In an effort to restore sense of order and calm of their lives, people have told me they feel compelled to get organized and create structure where possible. It's true that there are many things in life that you can't control. Here are 5 things that you can. Your closet. If you have to scramble to put together an outfit in the morning or can't easily locate what you want to wear, you're adding unnecessary stress to your daily routine. Fortunately, you have full control over what is in your closet and how it is organized. If your closet is a mess, you can make it significantly better in just 30 minutes. First, make sure your clothing is organized by type. Bottoms should be with other bottoms. Shirts should be hanging together and all in one direction. And sweaters and shoes should be neatly arranged. Anything on the floor should be either put in a hamper or be hung up. And if you want to see something you no longer want, start a donation bag. Time spent online. Some people try to distract themselves from their anxiety by reading news articles, shopping for themselves or for others, planning vacations, or just endlessly scanning their social media accounts. But spending too much time online is neither healthy nor helpful. Try to limit the time you spend scrolling through websites when you're at home. Instead, make plans to get dinner with friends, see a movie, or go shopping to a real store. Taking the initiative to make plans, following through with them, and doing something fun will give you a sense of purpose and control. Clutter. Studies have shown a correlation between clutter and stress. The good news, containing clutter is within your control. The bad news, it requires work and consistent attention. Make sure you have a specific place to put things that pile up quickly. School papers and projects, bills, magazines, office supplies, books. Spend 15 minutes every day putting things where they belong and tossing papers you don't need. Finish household tasks such as laundry when possible. And spend a few minutes before you go to bed straightening up any mess left in your kitchen or living room. If you do these few things consistently, you'll reduce both clutter and stress. Your social calendar. Instead of waiting to be invited to friends' houses, plan a gathering at your own house. You do not have to plan a huge party, but just invite a couple of friends or neighbors over for a casual meal. Having friends or family over has dual stress reducing benefits of connecting with people in person and getting organized. There's nothing like a deadline for getting your home cleaned and organized. Tasks that have gone undone for months have a way of finally getting completed when you know people are coming. And finally, your outlook. You know that organizing project that has been hanging over your head for several months, if not years. Stop letting it stress you out. Whether it is finally putting together that baby book for your second child or looking through an old box of papers or photos that you have been ignoring, simply starting a project can lift some of that weight off your shoulders. You'll also probably find that it's not as daunting as you imagined. Anzia is a freelance writer and owner of Neatnik. She can be reached at NicoleNeatnik.org.
And looking at business pages, the markets yesterday set another bunch of records. The Dow Jones Industrials climbed 65.19 to 19,614.81, up 12.6% year to date. NASDAQ was up 23.6 to 5,417.36. It's showing an 8.2% gain year to date. And the S&P 500 added 4.84 to 2,246.19. It's up 9.9% year to date. Oil for delivery in January rose $1.07 to settle at $50.84 on the New York Mercantile Exchange. Rising oil prices are threatening airline profits. Global airline earnings are set to decline next year after reaching a record in 2016 as higher oil prices clip margins, according to the industry's main trade group. Net income is likely to total $29.8 billion worldwide in 2017. The International Air Transport Association, or IATA, said in a statement Thursday, that's 16% lower than the $35.6 billion forecast for this year, a figure that itself represents a downward revision from the $39.4 billion estimated in June. Well, airlines have been reaping record earnings following a slump in the price of crude. IATA reckons a barrel of oil will average $55 in 2017, up from $44.60 this year, lifting jet fuel expenses to almost 19% of overall costs. Alexandre de Juniac, IATA's new chief executive officer, said the profit slide amounts to a very soft landing for the sector. These 3 years are the best performance in the industry's history, de Juniac said at IATA's annual media day in Geneva. At the same time, risks are abundant, political, economic, and security among them. And controlling costs is still a constant battle in our hyper-competitive industry. Though the higher oil price will squeeze earnings, airlines have improved their ability to efficiently restructure and manage their business, making the industry more resilient. De Juniac, former CEO of Air France KLM Group, where he clashed with unions over cost cuts, said on Bloomberg television. IATA, which represents 265 carriers accounting for 83% of global air traffic, pared the earnings forecast for the year because of slowing global economic growth and a 2% increase in non-fuel costs. The new 2016 estimate, still an all-time high, suggests industry profit will be $300 million higher than in 2015, with a margin of 5.1% of sales, also a record.
The fear of rising mortgage interest rates may have nudged people into action on home buying in November. Mortgage applications were down 0.7% from a week ago, the Mortgage Bankers Association reported Wednesday. But over the last month, mortgage applications for buying new and existing homes jumped 12%. The surge came as average interest rates on 30-year fixed-rate conventional mortgages shot up to 4.27% from 3.77%. People who were thinking about buying maybe said, "I'll buy now," said Michael Frontantoni, economist for the association. Yet he said the recent surge may also have happened partly because mortgage credit has become more available and also because the job market has improved and the election relieves some uncertainty about the future. Meanwhile, refinancing activity plunged 28% last month. The downturn is typical, Frontantoni said. Refinancing is almost entirely driven by rates. So when rates climb, people decide not to refinance existing mortgages. The average mortgage loan reached $247,563 in the third quarter, an all-time high since the Mortgage Bankers Association began tracking that figure. The organization reported, since the election, expectations of higher inflation have risen, and 10-year Treasury bond yields have moved up a sizable 0.5 percentage point in an anticipation of some inflation and a greater willingness by the Federal Reserve to raise rates. The Fed is expected by economists to raise interest rates 0.25 percentage point next week and slowly adjust rates higher in 2017. Mortgage rates are not set by the Fed, but they tend to move with the direction established by the Fed and are tied to yields on 10-year U.S. Treasury bonds. Last quarter, the 10-year Treasury bond was yielding 1.6%, and Wednesday it was at 2.35%, a sizable jump in such a short period. The Mortgage Bankers Association is predicting that the yield will be 2.5% late in 2017. And the rate on a 30-year mortgage rate will rise to 4.4%. Despite the rise in people seeking mortgages for home purchases lately, Frontantoni said getting a loan is still difficult for many potential home buyers. Mortgage credit increased in November, making it possible for more people to buy, but it remains tight, he said. The association tracks mortgage availability through an index. When mortgages were easily available prior to the housing market crash, the index rose above 800. It became very difficult to get a mortgage after the housing crisis and recession in 2008, and the index fell to 100 in 2012. It's now at 160, an improvement, but still tight, Frontantoni said.
Archer Daniels Midland Company announced Thursday that it will build a new state-of-the-art feed facility to replace its current plant in Columbus. Columbus is a key location for our U.S. business and is perfectly situated for a new modern plant to serve our customers throughout the region, Brent Fenton, president of ADM Animal Nutrition, said in a news release. Its existing infrastructure, including warehousing space and rail access, along with ingredient availability and proximity to our customer base, make it an ideal choice for our latest new facility. ADM said the new facility will have expanded warehouse space, automated packaging and process controls, and a new production line to provide range blocks for cattle, dairy cows, and horses. It did not say how much it will cost. ADM hopes to complete the new plant in early 2018. The current Columbus facility will remain operational during construction.
It's time now for sports. And Nebraska volleyball in the NCAA volleyball tournament actually is going on right now at Penn State at Nebraska. If anyone is an authority to speak to a winning mindset, it would be a coach with 7 NCAA titles. So when Penn State's Russ Rose talks about what can set the nation's top teams apart, your ears prick up. At Thursday's press conference before the Nittany Lions hit the practice court to prepare for Friday's 11 a.m. NCAA regional semifinal against top-seeded Nebraska, Rose pointed out facets of the Huskers he believes have helped them win 45 of their last 47 matches. He highlighted NU's relentless serving pressure and sharp passing, and he singled out sophomore outside hitter Michaela Froke, who has 62 kills in 4 career matches against Penn State, all Husker wins. But beyond any sturdy fundamental or elite difference maker, Rose sees something familiar in Nebraska, something he's seen in some of his past clubs, a mental toughness that stays steadfast in the game's biggest moments. I watched a lot of their matches on TV, and even when they were in gray area, they just looked really calm, Rose said. The benefit of having seniors that have played together, we've had teams similar to that when the kids were never rattled by the other team making a run. 3 of those upperclassmen, libero Justine Wong-Orentes, middle blocker Amber Rolfson, and middle hitter Katie Rolfson, spoke with reporters Thursday and stayed rigidly on message about how living the team's motto of dream bigger to win a second straight NCAA title depends on building a victory 1 point at a time. Again, point by point, Katie Rolfson said, we're going to say that a lot. Added Husker coach John Cook, I think what I see is we're experienced, we're mature, and they're really adapted the point-by-point mentality. They're not going to get too high, too low. They know how to take care of business. That's kind of how they will roll. In 2 wins over Penn State this season, the business has been the basics. The Huskers have passed well enough to let setter Kelly Hunter have her pick of offensive targets, and aggressive serving has kept Penn State from easily getting into system. Nebraska has also defended the Nittany Lions better than anyone, holding them to .129 attacking over the first 2 matches, less than half their season average of .294. But it's been the Huskers' savoir-faire that has separated them from the Nittany Lions in the match's critical points. In State College on November 4, Wong-Orentes served NU to a 6-0 run to put Nebraska up 9-3 in the 5th set, and the Huskers held on to win 15-11. 2 weeks later, Nebraska swept the Nittany Lions with big runs at the end of their first and third sets, including 4 straight points to close the sweep after Penn State led 22-21 in the final set. But since the loss in Lincoln, Penn State has steadied. Rose has more or less settled on a lineup after rotating back row specialists, and until recently played both setters Abby Dietering and Brianna Weiskircher. After losing 6 of 8 matches, the Nittany Lions have won 5 straight to reach their 13th straight regional semifinal, with Dietering handling the setting duties. Penn State has hit .321 or better each time out since the streak. The postseason is always a chance to drop whatever happened in the past and focus on what you can do right now, said Haley Washington, the Nittany Lions All-American middle blocker. There's no controlling the games you slipped up on. There's no controlling the issues that you had in the past.
And from Kansas City, Tyreek Hill had touchdowns receiving and on a punt return. Kansas City's defense made life miserable for Oakland quarterback Derek Carr, and the Chiefs beat the Raiders 21-13 on a frigid Thursday night to take control of the AFC West. Charkandrick West also had a touchdown run for the Chiefs, now 10-3. They moved into a first-place tie with Oakland, also 10-3, but holds a tiebreaker with 2 wins over their longtime division rivals. Carr was 17 of 41 for 117 yards passing, though the ugly stat line wasn't entirely his fault. Seth Roberts dropped just about everything thrown at him. Amari Cooper couldn't adjust to a long throw for a would-be touchdown early in the 4th quarter, and several more passes were dropped to the rock-hard surface of Arrowhead Stadium on a night when wind chills approached single digits. Alex Smith threw for 261 yards with a touchdown and an interception to help the Chiefs returning home after back-to-back road wins, beat Oakland for the 7th time in their last 8 meetings. Hill didn't seem bothered by the cold, scorching the Raiders for a 36-yard TD reception before bringing in a punt back 78 yards for another score. It made him the first rookie since Gale Sayers in 1965 with touchdowns on the ground, through the air, and on punt and kickoff returns in a single season. It was still 21-3 when the Chiefs lost linebacker Derek Johnson to an Achilles injury, and that seemed to briefly deflate them. Oakland proceeded to march 92 yards for a touchdown just before halftime. But the Raiders kept coming up empty with their chances in the second half. Smith threw a pick on the second play of the third quarter, but Oakland had to settle for a field goal. And when Smith was strip-sacked by Khalil Mack on the next play, the Raiders again had to try a field goal, only this time holder Marquette King couldn't get the snap down. The Raiders' last chance came with about 2 minutes left when a questionable pass interference penalty in a 4th and 4 conversion got them deep into Kansas City territory. But after a false start on 4th and 1, Carr's pass toward the end zone was batted incomplete. The Chiefs went on to pick up the first down they needed to put the game away.
In Nebraska football recruiting news, Nebraska football should have a decent official visit recruiting weekend, but the program got off to an early start Wednesday. Coach Mike Riley hasn't used the junior college option yet in NU's recruiting classes, but Blinn College safety Corinne Ballard may change that. Blinn College is in Texas. The 6'4", 200-pound Ballard started his official visit in Lincoln on Wednesday. He was co-defensive player of the year in the Southwest Junior College Football Conference after finishing with 41 tackles, 8 pass breakups, 5 sacks, and 3 interceptions. He was a very, very productive football player, Blinn coach Ryan Mahan said. He kind of blew up in the spring when everybody came through to recruit, and then in the fall, he had a very good season. Mahan said Ballard's height helps, but he's also fast enough to cover ground quickly. Nebraska values speed at safety. Ballard was an academic qualifier out of Houston Summer Creek High School, but he enrolled at Blinn, Mahan said, because he was underrated and under the radar of many schools. Ballard played 2 seasons at Blinn, so he will have 3 years to play 2 more seasons at the next level. Ballard is a mid-year enrollee, which means he can sign with the school next week. In other official visits scheduled for this weekend, Chuck Falagia, offensive tackle, 6'6", 335 pounds from Aledo, Texas. Among many offensive tackle prospects, Nebraska has targeted Falagia. He might be the largest, the consensus 4-star, who is rated the nation's number 98 overall player and number 14 offensive tackle by 24/7 Sports Composite Service, played high school ball in California until his senior year. Gavin Holmes, wideout at 5'11", 180 pounds from Justin, Texas. Iowa found this kid early and secured a commitment. A big senior season, 83 catches and 1,549 yards, 15 touchdowns, allowed Holmes to decommit from the Hawkeyes and open up his recruiting. Holmes, a 3-star prospect with better upside than that, has elite speed. Most of his highlights on Huddle are of him running by defensive backs on go and post routes. Isaac Slade Matucha, outside linebacker, 6'1", 225 from Honolulu. Defensive coordinator Mark Banker took the long trip to visit him, and judged by the Huddle highlights, it was an excellent decision. And in updates, Husker Illustrated reported that cornerback Quran Hafiz of Jacksonville, Florida, who announced his college decision December 19, has cooled on the Huskers after Riley chose to use an in-home visit with California corner Thomas Graham instead of visiting Hafiz. Graham is the better player, but Hafiz may land in the Big Ten. He's good too and physical. Oregon hired Willie Taggart from South Florida. Taggart, who used to work on Harbaugh's staff at Stanford, will be an active and effective recruiter on the West Coast. And in the last month, Michigan landed commits from arguably the two best defensive backs in Detroit, Ambry Thomas and Jalen Kelly Powell. In 2015 and 2016, the Wolverines landed just 3 of the top 20 prospects in the state of Michigan. This year, it could be 7 of the top 10. Take note of that. And I'm going to try to get you an update on that volleyball score, but my screen went blank.
Jessica Shepard sat down with new Nebraska coach Amy Williams last summer and opened a relationship and a promise. Longtime Husker coach Connie Yori had resigned, and Nebraska said farewell to a number of guards, graduation, transfers, and scholarship mind changes. Things were going to be tough for the Huskers, and Shepard, the leading scorer and rebounder from last year's team, had some questions. I trust Coach Williams, said Shepard, a sophomore from Fremont. I sat down with her, and I was not thinking about a transfer, but maybe this is my opportunity to go bigger and better. Her exact words were to me, Jess, there's not going to be a place bigger and better by the time you graduate. There's no reason not to trust that. So even with a 5-game losing streak, the longest non-conference losing streak since the Nebraska program began in 1974-75, Shepard and her teammate, senior Allie Havers, said the team must trust the process of improving every day, every game. That could make Friday's 7 p.m. game against San Jose State, now 2-7, a very important game for the Huskers. If we don't all trust the process, we're going to continue to lose, continue to give up easy rebounds, said Havers. Shepard, who scored 23 points, 22 in the second half, and grabbed a career-high 16 rebounds in a Tuesday loss to Drake, agreed. We all need to buy into the process, but be there for each other, have each other's backs, and know it's going to work, she said. Nebraska has shown signs that all is not in vain. The Huskers scraped to tie Drake with just over 6 minutes left in the third quarter, but the Bulldogs pulled away. On Sunday, Nebraska stumbled early and eventually lost to unbeaten California, but NU held the Bears to a 2-point advantage in the second half. I want to be satisfied, and I'm not going to remember the record. Okay, we lost to Drake. I'm not going to remember that, said Havers. I'm going to remember getting through this fight, getting through adversity. That's what it's all about. Williams added that her relatively young team is still getting used to the process and each other. We talked about focusing on the process, Williams said. Right now, a lot of people are going to be looking at the big picture, the record, and where we stand. Our goal each and every night out is to try and work toward becoming the very best team we're capable of becoming. We're talking about complete 40-minute games. We're still a team trying to work toward putting together complete games to be able to be the team we're capable of being.
Just as an update, Penn State won the first set of the volleyball tournament semifinals game, 25-23. They're currently in the middle of the second set, and Nebraska is leading 17-14. And it looks like it's time to wrap up another Friday morning broadcast. This is Bob Gotting. It's been a pleasure reading for you today, and have a great week.
And I'm Ralph Morocco. It's been my pleasure to be with you, and I'll look forward to doing it next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ralph. Thank you for coming.
Must be a timeout because it's stuck at 14-17. First game was obviously pretty tough, 25-23.
Yeah, no kidding.
Did you see your stocking on the door?
I did, yes.
Very nice. That was very nice of him.
Yes.
Do that.
She's pretty amazing.
Pretty busy lady with all her health issues and her grandkids and all the stuff she deals with. She gets a lot done.
She gets a lot done.
Yeah, there must be either a timeout or a network timeout. Let's see. ESPN and you. All right, I'm going to go see if I can watch the rest of that game.
All right.
I'll see you next week.
Yeah.
I'll check into Fire Spring a little bit more.